Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, North Garden Comics. My name is Chris, and today's video I'm going to start a brand new series that I'm going to call Shortbox Showcase. And that's where I will pull one of the short boxes off of my shelves here, we'll take it down, and we'll do kind of a show and tell through the box. Today we're going to look at this box here behind me, but I'm not going to tell you what's inside, I'm just going to let it be a surprise. Check it out. Okay, in a minute we're going to zoom in and I will show you the books that are in this box behind me, but I thought by way of explanation I'd give you a couple of the reasons as to why I'm doing a series like this. I'm calling it Shortbox Showcase, but the idea of what we're doing of showcasing parts of a collection, not my invention at all. In fact, the first reason I'm doing this is because I enjoy watching other YouTube creators' videos that they've made posting different sections of their collection. Maybe it's a short box that they pull out, maybe it's the full run of a title that they've collected, but some element of their collection that they are sharing with viewers, and I like to watch those kind of things, and I've even added some books to my own wish list as a result of watching videos like that. So I thought on the flip side I would produce some content like that in the hopes that others might get some joy from seeing some of the books in my own collection. I'll also say that, you know, as a collector, and if you're a collector too, the books that we buy, after we've bought them and read them and bagged them and boarded them and cataloged them, organized them, stuck them in a box like this, they don't come back out of those boxes very often. And sometimes they get reread and pulled out for a short time and then back in again, but they live most of their lives in lonely darkness. So I thought this would be a good reason for me to open some of these boxes again, pull the books out, look at them, re-experience that joy of the covers and the artwork there, and to share those with you. Second thing I'll say is that I'm starting with this box here, which, you know, is actually Transformers books. Surprise, surprise. Specifically, though, what we're going to look at today are the Marvel Comics Transformers books. They've also been published by Dreamwave, which is now no longer in existence, and currently IDW, right here. But today we're going to look primarily at the Marvel books because that's how I actually got into comic books to begin with. I was like 11 years old when the Transformers franchise started, and Hasbro, you know, had low-hanging fruit in me. I was that perfect age to get hooked on the toys, the cartoons, and then eventually that transitioned me into the comic book. So we'll kind of walk down memories lane here and see where it all started for me as a comic book collector. So that's enough out of me. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at these books. All right, here we go. First with number one, kind of a classic cover, Bill Sienkiewicz, and it was originally slated to be a 4-part limited series, which of course ran for ultimately 80 issues. You want to drive sales? Bring in a guest appearance like Spider-Man early on. And these early issues that I have, these are not in the best condition, but I was just happy to have them in my collection. And I didn't start with number one. I'll show you the first issue that I got when we get to it. There's another, probably the most famous Transformers cover of all of them. I looked it up. Artist's name is Mark Bright, and it's been, you know, reproduced in lots of different ways since then, but that's probably the most famous cover, number 5. There's actually you can see on a lot of these, there's tape here, and that's how they were when I bought them. It's not that I read them so many times. This one's kind of beat up, but like I said, I wish I remembered when specifically and where I picked these up. But I was a teenager when I got them, so I think I was just happy to find a copy of them. I'm sure I didn't pay very much for them at the time. Now this one here, number 8, this was actually my very first comic book. This one also has some tape here on the staples. I would love, you know, I'll keep my eyes out if there's ever higher grade copies that I can get for cheap. That'd be great, but these have that sentimental value since they were some of my first comic books, and this was the very first. I think my mom, well, I know my mom bought this for me, and that's probably, you know, early teens at the most for age. And, you know, first appearance of the Dinobots. I think she probably got it at a garage sale or something because she got me this and a couple other things from that. But this was where it all began. This always reminds me of like a Dazzler knockoff character, Circuit Breaker. You know, these early issues, these read very differently as a kid than they do when you're an adult. I have actually reread these in the last handful of years or so, and it's amazing to me. You can really see through the story to the drive to increase toy sales through these. It seemed that just about every issue they were introducing some new character or new team of characters that they were really just introducing so they could drive toy sales. I know, for example, this and number 18 was actually a two-part story that had Blaster. It was on Cybertron. And Bob Budiansky, who was really single-handedly responsible for just about all of the original lore that we know today, he talked about the fact that he liked, writing some of these characters, but because of the quick turnaround, he liked writing Blaster, for example, but he could only write the 2 issues because then Hasbro was always pushing him to introduce new characters, new teams. So, licensed properties were not super popular from a comic writer's perspective. Okay, moving on through the next chunk here. First appearance, I think, of the Aerial Bots. One of the Marvel 25th anniversary kind of framed covers there. There's a series on Netflix called The Toys That Made Us. And in the second season of that show, they do an episode all about Transformers and how it got started. And it's pretty amazing to see. They just basically took these Japanese toy lines and, mashed them all together. And Hasbro went to Marvel one day, went to Jim Shooter and said, we want you to write these stories. Or they transformed one of the robots in front of Jim Shooter, and he said, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Why do they transform? Why do they do that?" And Hasbro said to him, "Well, that's what we want you to come up with. We want you to come up with the backstory." And I think it was Denny O'Neil that is attributed. He got first cut at it, and he's the one who came up with the name Optimus Prime. But then, hold that thought. This is actually a UK reprint of one of the Transformers UK issues that they did here for number 33. And then another, that's part 2 of that same story. And then this one here, number 35, this is actually the first comic book that I bought. So number 8 was the first one I was ever given. This was the first one I ever bought. And it's always been interesting to me to note the colors on here. You've got 2 combiners, so there's actually 5 Transformers making up each of these robots, but they're not all, pink or red and then blue. They all have all different colors, and it just makes me wonder, was it a budget thing? Was it just the coloring at the time was less sophisticated, or they didn't want to spend the money on the cover to have those kind of that differentiation of color? But yeah, so we got a pink and a blue robot they're fighting. But that was my first one, and this was really where I really started buying them regularly going forward. But back to the kind of the origin there. Optimus Prime, Denny O'Neil, but then Bob Budiansky got pulled in, and Jim Shooter said, "Hey, we need you to write 26 character names and bios, essentially over a weekend," is what it sounded like. And so he came up with names like Megatron and Grimlock and all these characters, and the franchise was born. And little did he know that the things he was doing then would, well, here it is, 2020. We're still loving that franchise. Pretenders. I remember these. I had some of these toys as well. all these covers, you know, when you look at these comics that are early in your collection, I don't know about you, but real nostalgic, sentimental, kind of flashes you back to when you first got them, and maybe it was when you were a kid and first started reading these. Oh yeah, Power Master Optimus Prime. This one kind of came around. It must have been around the time of the movie, because you got Galvatron and Rodimus Prime there battling. It was, I don't even remember how they tried to explain this in continuity, but that must have been around the movie time that they did that story. But I didn't start with the comics. I started with the toys, and I have still in my possession hundreds of the Transformers toys. Sad to say that I always thought that cover was cool with the Seacons. But sad to say that about 16 years ago we had a house fire, and sorry, pausing again. I always thought Megatron's face. Almost like, is that a nose? Is that a little pig snout? It's like almost Megatron meets Skeletor or something there. I don't know. But anyway, we had a house fire, and while it did not destroy my entire collection, it did render it essentially non-transformable. I don't know if for any of you old enough to remember Shrinky Dinks. That was a double size, number 50 there. If you remember Shrinky Dinks, you had these little plastic things you'd put in the oven, and they would shrink and they would get real brittle. And that's essentially what happened to my Transformers toys. They got soot covered, so they're kind of tacky and blackened, and then they you can't transform them anymore without feeling like you're going to break them. This is actually a Jim Lee cover, one of 2 covers that he did for the Transformers series. I've mentioned this in other videos that I wasn't paying close attention to who creators were when I was a kid, and this is a prime example. At the time, you would have said Jim Lee, and I would have been like, who? But that's a Jim Lee cover. But even though those Transformers toys were largely, they're defective now. I haven't gotten rid of them. They actually sit in 3 large tubs, really large tubs in my garage. And who knows, maybe I'll try to clean some of them up someday. There's kind of another funny Megatron face. It's kind of a cool cover. But maybe I'll try to clean them up someday, get them out. But I haven't had the heart to actually get rid of them at this point. All right, 3/4 of the way through here. Most of these I still have in just polypropylene bags in your basic backing board. The first 20 or so issues, and then the last handful of issues I have in Mylar. And I'm kind of working on this long-term project to slowly transfer everything over to Mylar bags and boards. But I do it, it's kind of a long process, because Mylar is just so much more spendy than the regular. That's a cool alien there. Number 67, this is the other Jim Lee cover that he did here for the series. And like I said, Transformers comics are still being made today. The publisher is IDW, and they went for a little while through publisher Dreamwave, that I think has gone bankrupt, or went bankrupt and is no longer in existence. But Marvel's where it all started. Now, in this last run, you'll see that I'm missing just a couple issues still. I had almost every issue, again, from going way back to when I was a kid. So I have 73, but I'm missing 74. I have 2 issues of 75. One's actually direct edition, and one is newsstand. The direct edition copy is in better shape than the newsstand copy, but I got them both pretty inexpensively. You can fork out some dollars for these, some of these later run books, because they were low print runs. Looks like I spent $1.25 on this Comic Relief. That was a comic shop in my area when I was a kid. So 76, and I'm missing 77. But some of these later issues, this being one example, I got this for $1 at a comic store that was having a sale. You take them out and look at them. They're not in perfect condition. They have a little bit of waviness to them. But all in all, for $1, you can't beat it. 79, and then there, number 80. Number 80 in a 4-issue limited series. So that was a cool way to end it. So that does it for the 80-issue series, but that is not all there was for Marvel Comics and the Transformers. Kind of got this last this last stack here. They were doing, I have a couple of these for G.I. Joe and a few for the Transformers, these little comic magazines. This reprints numbers 17 and 18, that 2-part Blaster story I mentioned earlier. But I don't even remember, like I said, where I got these, but these are cool. The little comic magazine. This one, second one here. I like those. Oh, this is just it's actually a trade collection of some of the early comics there. And these are just some of the extra either one-shots or mini-series that they did for Transformers. This isn't Marvel, Blackthorn Publishing. Official How to Draw the Transformers. So that was cool. I think there's actually a few of these. Yeah, it's number 3, but I only have number 3. I'd love to find numbers 1 and 2 at some point. And, oh yeah, look at that. Transformers 3D. Let me grab something. I actually still have there you go, the 3D glasses that came with these books. That is old school 3D right there. Those would come with these 3D books. So number 1, 2, and 3. And I remember as a kid thinking this style of art, like, oh, that looks so grown up as compared to the cartooniness of some of the books and the main part of the series. This, I think that beat upness, yeah, that's just nasty old tape on the bag there. But G.I. Joe and the Transformers 4-part miniseries. Two really cool franchises for children of the 80s. And then Headmasters. I think that was like season 3/4 of the cartoon. What was the planet? Nebulon that they went to. Yeah, Target Masters, Headmasters. Oh, this is just I think this came with a copy of the 20th anniversary copy of the movie DVD that I bought. That's cool. And then, of course, the 3-part limited series in comic form of the movie. Unicron. And this is like a kind of like the official guide. It's like encyclopedic type of a layout of all the different characters. I think it's, 4 parts maybe? Yeah. And then kind of some of the last things. Let me alter this a little bit here. This was, Transformers Generation 2, where they tried to really toughen it up and make it seem not like little kid toys. This is not your father's Autobot. This was a 12-part series. As a kid, or, whatever year this was, I was probably, actually at this point I was probably 20, because this is the early 90s. I had the first 6 parts of this, which we'll get through here, but I was missing issues 7 through 12, and in actually the last 3-4 years I've actually been able to get those together. And every issue I have here, like this was at a Half Price Books, it was $1.25, so that was a great find. And all these others I think I spent $1 on each, which is fantastic. Again, you could buy them at a comic store probably and find it marked up pretty significantly, but I was really happy. I think it was like a comic book garage sale that I got these at. So it was one where a garage full of comics, and I don't think they were even bagged and boarded, but it was any book was $1, and they were not alphabetical, but I found 4 or 5 of these at that garage sale. And then this is the last book I'm going to show you. It's not a Marvel book, but kind of fast forward, that was the end of the Transformers comics under Marvel, and I remember I had kind of drifted away from comics for a while, and then I think this was around 2000, I should look, 2003, 2004 timeframe. I was in a mall with my wife, and there was a comic book store there, and I said, let's just go in and look. And I went in and looked, and there was this preview, and I happened to be right at the time that Dreamwave was taking over the license, and this was the first book they put out to preview some of the things they were doing, and they were going to do a comic based on the cartoon series Transformers Armada. But I was so excited to find this and see Transformers comics were back, and yeah, basically I've followed them again since they returned with Dreamwave, and now with IDW. Well, that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching this first Shortbox Showcase video, and thanks for letting me share my Transformers comics with you from the Marvel Comics era. I hope there was something in there that you enjoyed. You know, if you were a fan of the Transformers as a kid, whether that was the comic books or the toys or the cartoon, or if you're a current fan of the Transformers franchise, I'd love to hear about that in the comments section below. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.